All this is by way of saying that most of the people involved in the Turndot group and these conferences are not interested in aesthetic value at all. In fact, it's the opposite. They're allergic to aesthetic value. The feeling is that these kinds of images should never be anywhere near aesthetics. However, they have been near aesthetics many times. So the controversy that ended up splitting and then ending the group, the controversy was about the use of aesthetics or the abuse of aesthetics. Jérôme Bourgon, he's a scholar in Lyon who's done the most on this. He's published a book and a CD, I'll show you several things of his. He objected to the aestheticization of this. And the aestheticization, however, of these images has a long history in the 20th century because these images, several of them, were owned by Georges Bataille. And before that, they were written about by French psychologists. So then they actually entered the mainstream of circles of French surrealism, where they were taken as indispensable examples of transgression. They were the most transgressive images imaginable, and therefore they were important for the theory of surrealism. So they already were aesthetic. So those of us in the group, including me, who argued with Jérôme Bourgon, our argument was, it's too late. These images are part of the history of aesthetic reception. They're not simply documentary photographs. There is a brief essay by Agamben on this subject, in which he argues very much the same way as Claude Lanzmann was trying to argue against Shorty Huberman. The Agamben argument in relation to these images is that they should never be seen or discussed except for their political and social and historical context by legal historians, by social historians, and so on. And then against that, there were those of us who argued that you can't stop that, you can't just wheel away the aesthetic because the aesthetic already exists. So there's a long analysis of many of these slides that's been done. I have my own interest in this subject, which is partly peripheral here, but we can talk about it afterwards. It's not directly associated with the problem of the document, but my own interest in this material is not the aesthetic so much as it is the fact that people who study these, their whole careers, don't look at them for more than a tenth of a second each. They flash them on the screen and then they can take them away. So there's a kind of looking that's very, very, that supports the idea that they're transgressive. If you don't look at something for very long, then certainly that thing can continue to be transgressive as long as possible. It's known that Bataille used to keep one of these in his jacket pocket. We take it out, so I look at it and go back again, but it's really creepy. Another part of the analysis. So, fifth part of this history of the project is this book that I'm doing with a woman who's a research sociologist in Paris named Maria Di Bella. So a lot of this material will be out by the end of the year. And the last one example of the history of this, and the one I want to concentrate on here, is a small book that comes with a DVD that was published by Jérôme Bourgon. Here it is. So there's the back of it. So his idea is that, apart from his DVD, his idea is that you should and can tell the history of these images without bringing in aesthetics. However, his DVD is absolutely full of aesthetic moves, right? Like this. There's an awful lot of this kind of thing that goes on. The Ken Burns effect is popular with Jérôme for zooming in on things. I think I have another film clip here, but you get the idea. Yeah, this kind of thing, the Ken Burns effect, using zooming in and panning over these existing still photographs. So there is one section in his DVD, this one, which is especially egregious this way, because this is a close-up of Bataille's book, Tears of Heroes. On one of the pages where he reproduces this, using the Ken Burns effect to slowly show you the whole thing, which seems to be absolutely an aestheticized movie. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to dwell on those, but wanted to make that point that this to me is a sign of the state of scholarship and thinking on this field, that a research group can basically be being destroyed by this kind of disagreement when these things are clearly meshed together. Okay, my last example under this heading is this website I just recently discovered. Have any of you know about this? I just found this like 2 days ago. Geograph.ac.uk is a kind of what they call in the UK an anorak adventure. Anoraks are like nerd geeks. You know, their idea is to take a photograph for every square tenth of a kilometer in all of UK and Ireland. So this is their home page. They have 113,000 photographs so far, and then you can zoom in, you get their map. It's an interactive map. Red means they have the photographs all done. Green means they're still lacking. You can see that most of the anoraks live in the UK, not in Ireland. So when you zoom in, here I am zooming in on a little town in Ireland where my mother-in-law lives. See what's there. And it's basically all been photographed. And these photographs vary as widely as the people who take them. But they basically form a spectrum, which seemed to me a very interesting spectrum to contemplate in this regard, because when they're in a center of a town, or like near a castle or something, then the photograph, as you can see some of those, points at the landmark, and therefore is, you might say, more straightforwardly documentary, but also often as aesthetic as they can make it. Whenever there's anything in the picture where the person has to stand in a certain place to take it, whenever there's